Okay, so this one should be quick. Just wanted to talk about some more about. I think I've talked about every topic before, including talking about every topic before. So it's basically. So this one's going to be about freaking 30 seconds in. I haven't even talked about what the video is about yet. Basically, I want to talk a little bit more about player fantasy. A little bit. That, usually it's not talked about a whole lot, especially at our table. But, player fantasy is, the image that the player has in their mind of what character they're playing. I like to call it the silhouette sometimes. The image of who, the idealized version of who this character is, what you're going for, that kind of stuff. And, a lot of the time, it's hard to actually live up to that. And you see, I see characters in, whatever fantasy media, anime, whatever it is, and you can't, replicate that exactly onto a TTRPG character. Whatever anime the main character, cuts through, 40 dudes before he even gets to anybody that's, posing a challenge. And you kind of don't really do that in a game of D&D, at least not most of the time. I feel like it should be done more. I definitely like that idea, but at the same time, if you overdo it, and if you really break it down to the minutia, then it's just okay, you're spending an entire session rolling 60 attack rolls against nobodies, and they can barely hit. It's not super engaging directly, which is why you use things like minion rules, swarm rules, and cleaving and stuff like that, so you can cut through 7 little dudes, and by little dudes I just mean weak, at a time, and that can make it more engaging. But that's kind of it. There's so much road work. Oh my god. But that's part of a lot of player fantasies. And kind of got something that's been sticking in my head is there's two things that are sticking in my head. One about 40K, and two about One Punch Man of all things. So I don't know how much you may or may not have seen or read about One Punch Man, but the whole premise is that the main character is the most overpowered character ever. He just wins all his fights automatically. And the tension, if he's there, the way the whole show is, One Punch Man is almost a supporting character, essentially. All the other characters are the ones doing the struggling and the self-actualization and power crystallization and leveling up and doing all this stuff, and then One Punch Man shows up and just one-shots whatever it is, the grand world devourer that has consumed every other world in the Milky Way, and One Punch Man comes up and kicks him in the nuts and the guy explodes. And I think overall the story does a really good job of telling a story with that type of character, because it relegates him to more of a supporting character role, even though he is the main character. And especially there was a fighting game recently, a One Punch Man fighting game, and I think it was a tag arena fighting game. And by arena, the Naruto Ninja Storm games, where it's a behind the shoulder third person perspective and you're controlling a dude. But what they do with Saitama, the One Punch Man, is if you put him on your team, he takes a few minutes to show up. He's like, if you can't actively switch to him yet, he's just in your team. You just have a blank spot, and there's like a little cut in where it shows him running, and there's a timer. And as soon as that timer ticks down, then you can use him. And if you lose before you get access to Saitama, you lose the match. I think that's a really clever way of implementing Saitama in a fighting game directly. It's really funny too. It's just so funny in a simple way. Because that's also something the manga and the show does, where he's like, he gets distracted by the fact that there's like a sale at the grocery store, and he can afford enough meat to last him like 2 weeks on like half of it, like 50% off. So he's like, oh my god, I gotta go do that, and he disappears. Now, obviously, you can't really do a character like that in a TTRPG. Maybe you could do it with like a funny DM PC or something, but that's not amazing. I don't love that idea. But so that's not like a one-to-one type of thing, but it's just like an example of a really specific kind of player fantasy. So that's kind of an idea, but going back to like what I was thinking about with 40K, and this is something that the novels and the game and the tabletop game kind of skirt between. Like Space Marines are billed as these like walking tanks, these immortal demigods, sons of the Emperor's sons, like, and in the tabletop and in the novels, they just get cut down like nothing, because every faction has, like, you know, impenetrable armor that's 3 feet thick and can, you know, stand up to supernovas, but also every faction also has like guns that cut through that with no problem, like, or swords that cut through that, like. You know, I've seen animations where like just two Space Marines in armor. One of them's got like, they've got chainswords, and the chainsword just cuts through the one Space Marine's armor. And I think that's more so a fault of those adaptations, much more than a fault with like the settings, like stats and premises in general. Because especially a lot of those adaptations, you have the Space Marines kind of like dancing around like ballerinas, like just without any heft to their armor. And that's not to say Space Marines aren't fast and agile, but there has to be some weight to them. Like if you do like in in a show, if you do that kind of adaptation with Space Marines and you just do mocap of dudes not in super heavy armor, it's not going to look right. And that's something I've also had with in Space Marine 2. There's lots of mods and stuff where they had Terminators and stuff in, and they just use the default animations for like a normal Primaris. And it's like, it doesn't look right. And it's also, it doesn't really capture like what a Terminator would really do. Like if a Space Marine is a walking tank, a Terminator is an aircraft carrier. Like, their armor is actually like a foot thick or whatever the fuck it is. And they just lumber through the battlefield. They can't even run. So, but that kind of gets back to like player fantasy. Players want to just play the big fucking dude that wades through hordes of minions. And that doesn't always make for an engaging game that you want to play for a long time. For me, I've enjoyed Space Marine 2 for a long time because it has lots of engaging systems. And, regular enemies can rip through your armor. They're very dangerous, but you have all the tools to defend yourself against those things and to rip through them. That, as long as you're skilled at it. Like, And it's not like some kind of where you gotta like practice for hours and hours. It's just like, you just pick up the game and engage with the systems and learn it. It's fine. But that's one aspect of player fantasy. Like, you can't. There's a disconnect between like the walking tank that wades through hordes of enemies and, oh, that guy's got this one type of gun that'll cut a Space Marine in half. So Space Marines have to use cover. They have to use intelligent battlefield tactics like anybody else. So there's a dichotomy there. You can't just have the best of both worlds, and you have to pay close attention to those types of things. So, I don't have any grand theses on these. Just kind of food for thought, really. Nothing specific.